Toll Road is here with
Road Trip Rich.
and we are at the Johnston Family and Indian Agency. We're going to check out some of the Indian artifacts they have. They got a recreation of the actual part of the Ohio Erie Canal, actually Miami and Erie Canal. Going to take a boat ride on that and buckle up, buddy.
That's right.
About ready to take a ride on the toll road.
Cross your fingers. Hope we don't get wet because it looks like it's going to pour any second.
Yeah, that's right. We don't mind a little wet. Hey, you know one thing about the toll road? No rain delays, no rain outs. Rain or shine.
He got a raincoat. I don't.
Section of the Miami and Erie Canal. This section gets surveyed in about 1835. The first work begins in the summer of 1836. It's done by some workers that we call cutters and grubbers. The cutters and grubbers are the workers who are coming in to clear the land. And this big piece of dirt out here that we have, that we call the towpath, that's where the animals walk, that's not there. It's just down to the river. At that point in time. So the cutters and grubbers are clearing all the trees and bushes and vines and things, and they're really making the space wide enough for the diggers to come in and actually do their work. So the digging crews come in the fall of 1836, and we have kind of a wet winter, and so they're not able to make a whole lot of progress in some of the sections. So it really pushes this building of this section into the 1837. And so we finally get the canal constructed properly and get the dimensions in place. And then
how deep is the canal?
Well, the canal has really three dimensions. One of them is the depth, which is considered to be 4 feet at a minimum.
Okay.
And then we have to build this towpath because the towpath becomes the dike that keeps the water from running to the river. Okay. Now up on top of the towpath, all the animals on the canal use one towpath. And so it has to be 10 foot wide. Now the animals are pulling nose to tail as opposed to in parallel like our mules are today. So nose to tail would have been the process. So 10 foot of space at a minimum up on top of the towpath. And then you have to have enough space for 2 canal boats to pass.
Now, how does that work?
Well, I'll come back to that. Yeah, that's fine. What happens is that you have to have enough space for 2 canal boats. Now, what really is kind of driving the space issue is the width of locks in Ohio. Most of the locks, almost all of them, were 90 feet long, 15 feet wide. So a boat can't be 15 feet wide. You get stuck going through the lock. And so because of that, most of the boats are this size or smaller. This boat has a gunnel-to-gunnel width of about 13 feet. Okay. So that means that if you're going through a lock and you were 13 feet wide, you had a foot on each side to negotiate, providing that none of the rocks had moved and all those kind of things were going on. So if you have 2 13s, that's 26. So with a minimum width of the canal of 40 feet, you get some space on the towpath side, space in the middle between 2 boats, and then space on the heel side. Okay, so and the third and final dimension is the depth of the canal, and at a minimum we wanted 4 feet of water.
I just noticed we're moving along pretty good.
But we're doing about 3 miles per hour. Mm-hmm.
Now on the towpath there, now you got animals walking on it all day long. A lot of road apples.
Well, I mean, yeah, probably. But what happens on a lot of boats in the period is that we really have 2 sets of animals. We have one set working in the morning, and then we would have swapped them for the set that's been resting. So this middle section of the boat on some boats is a little bigger, and that's a stable for an extra set of animals.
So they bring the animals in here and rest.
And again, what happens is when you put them up on the canal, you're going to have all kinds of things up there. And I'd say road apples are the least of our concerns. I call them mule muffins. So we have those up on the canal as well. So The really interesting part is that when you have two sets of animals and two sets of boats going, you have to have a process to pass.
With the ropes and
yeah.
everything.
So here's the process, and what happens is that the hardest working boat gets the right of way.
The one going upstream.
There you go. Very good. Yeah. And so we are now the downstream craft. Water in this part of Ohio was all flowing to the Ohio River, right. Okay, and including the water in the canal. Okay, and so because of that, our obligation was to stop on this side, which is called the heel side, and then and once we get stopped, the front tow rope sinks clear to the bottom of the canal, comes up on the towpath, and the worker who's working with the animals disconnects the tow rope from the tree, and then he walks his animals clear to what we call the riverside. That's the far edge of the towpath, and that allows the upstream craft, working a little bit harder because we're working against gravity, to step over the ropes and keep coming and not have to start and stop. Now, starting and stopping is really the most difficult thing on the animals.
Yeah, I imagine once it's going, it's probably pretty easy.
Well, it's never real easy,
right,
but
right.
Remember, this is a heavy boat. This boat weighs 16 ton, and that was very common for a boat of this weight, this size. And a freighter boat of this size. Now, this is not a freighter, but a freighter boat could carry up to 80 ton of freight. So now you've got almost 100 ton of something being pulled up, sometimes by two, sometimes by three animals.
That's it, just for 2 or 3 animals?
Yeah. That's pretty much the limit on that. So once we had passed, then the downstream craft can pick up and rehitch and go on down until they meet the next lock or the next boat or whatever. So the upstream craft always gets the right of way. And then, again, in this part of Ohio, what happens is that all the water is heading towards Cincinnati, both in the Great Miami River as well as the Canal and other rivers on this part of the slope. So we have to remember that Ohio is not a flat state. And that what really happens is we have a large divide. I'm going to take this thing off. I have to do a little work and I don't want to damage it. So I can get it off. There you go. Oh, okay. What happens is that this large divide really determines what downstream really means. On this side of the big divide, downstream means heading for the Ohio River. On the other side of the divide, that takes water to Lake Erie. So all the rivers north and west of here go to Lake Erie. Okay, so that's something you have to know about canals.
So like the Ohio Canal going from Portsmouth to Erie, that downstream would be going north on that one, you're saying?
Well, again, only part of it would be. If from Akron to Portsmouth would be downhill, but from Akron to Cleveland,
so once you get to a certain
goes
point,
the other way,
okay.
goes north. And on this canal, downstream is from basically Lockington, just up the canal here to Cincinnati, but then on up, it's from New Bremen in Ogways County up to Lake Erie. And we had this large divide, which is a gift of the last glacier, that determines kind of where water's going to flow downhill. So that's really what's going on with that. Okay, we're going to turn the boat around here.
Okay.
And we're going to become the upstream craft here in a minute. This basin that we're using here is not part of the canal originally. This was built for the Ohio Historical Society when we came into the site, and the reason it's here is that we have to put the boat in the boathouse when we are not using it. So we have to kind of spin that boat around and put it in there. But we are heading back north. We own about 1.25 miles of restored canal property here at the Johnston farm. And so this section of the canal actually survives the giant flood of 1913. Now the canal, of course, is being pronounced dead at that point.
Yeah.
The good news is that most of this part of the canal really survived pretty well. Down south of Dayton, it washed away, towpaths and locks and all kinds of things. So it was a lot more devastating on south of here. If you think about watching Joe, who's working with the animals. Think about 6 feet of water above his head coming down through here during that flood. It's a lot of water. We have reports that say on 2 occasions, water came within 48 inches of where the museum sits.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot of water for a flood. So that was a devastating flood, and it really is the kind of the unofficial death of the canal in 1913. In Ohio, we actually build canals from 1825, opening day, July the 4th of 1825, until 1848. And when we finish building canals in Ohio, we have hand dug. The year is 1848, and we've hand dug over 1,000 miles of ditch.
Now, is there only two canals?
Well, there are 2 major canals, and then there are offshoots of the canals. I don't know whether you're from this area or you know,
Yeah, Dayton. Yeah.
Dayton. So you've been down to Trader's World on 75. That was a canal. Route 63 ran from Hamilton to Lebanon. We called that the Lebanon Extension Canal. Up north of here, there was a section of the canal built. It was kind of an offshoot that went up to Sydney and on up to Port Jefferson, and that's how the water came down from what we now call Indian Lake. Back then it was called Lewiston Reservoir. So there were lots of places like that where we had extensions that went off different places. 2 major canals and then extensions of canals as well.
What kind of fish am I seeing in here?
Oh, you're seeing all kinds of good old Ohio
Just any
panfish, crappies, bluegills, catfish, carp, bass, just that kind of stuff. What happens is that we have some people that fish, and I think sometimes
There's
they
a
dump
bobber
fish,
right there,
They
yeah.
dump them in here, and other times when we have high water and the river comes into the canal, sometimes fish come with them. I think we've got all kinds of fish in here. So an important thing to remember about canals in Ohio is that canals were really not set up to carry people. That was not the primary goal. The primary goal was commerce. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to set up a transportation system that will help people living in the interior parts of Ohio get their produce, basically farm produce, out to larger markets. And so that was the goal of doing that, and they succeeded very nicely at doing that. So what you're riding in right now is the most northern section of the canal by 1837. Canal gets started in southwestern Ohio in 1825, and we get the canal built from Middletown down to the Ohio River. Then we build the canal up from Middletown to Dayton. Takes about 4 years to get 63 miles of the canal established by 1829. And then there's a little downtime for some good old-fashioned Ohio politicking. You have to have some of that. It's a big project. And so finally, when that gets settled, the Canal Commission decides to push the canal on up of what the Dayton area, the Huber Heights area,
right.
on up into this area. And as I mentioned earlier, this part of the canal gets its primary work done in 1836 and 37, and we open this part of the canal up for general service by July 4th weekend of 1837. Featured invited guest that comes up to meet everybody and say hi and remind everybody why he's the champion of the settler in that area. It's William Henry Harrison. Harrison's living in retirement in North Bend, Ohio, and he comes up to visit friends, including the Johnstons. He was
President number 9.
Yeah, for a short period of time.
Yeah, very short.
Well, what happens is that if you remember, he had allowed his name to be put into the hat, so to speak, for the 1836 election. He's not selected by the Whigs, and so he comes back in 1837. He's out pressing the flesh, he's saying hi, and remember, he's kind of the champion of the settler in this area because he's the person that gets credit for chasing the Indians off and all that during the Indian Wars. And so he's in retirement, and by the way, his wife does not want him to run again. Interesting story, because he not only runs, but he wins the nomination and then catches pneumonia and dies only 30 days after being inaugurated. So it's an interesting kind of a scenario. Mrs. Harrison, by the way, becomes the first presidential wife to get a stipend upon the death of her husband.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I did not know
So
that.
he's president number 9. There's a really good book out if you're interested in it. I got it for a birthday present one time. I think it's called Interesting Facts of Ohio or something. And it lists the presidents and it lists all kinds of interesting things about
cool.
what goes on. So if you're ever interested, it's a good background material.
What's it called again?
I I think it's called Interesting Facts of Ohio, but it's a big, thick book, but it's really well done, and my wife got it for me for a birthday present at one point. So.
Who was that? What was that book that one gentleman was telling us last week? Frontiersman or something like that.
The Frontiersman is a historic novel
by Eckert.
Eckert, yeah. It's one of his first books, I believe, and I have an original copy of that.
Oh, really?
My uncle was a real historian, kind of an amateur historian, and upon his death, I inherited the book. So,
yeah,
so it's
guy we met at Serpent Mound last week was telling us about that book.
Yeah, good. And it's pretty accurate. I think it's not designed to be a historic,
kind of historic
book.
fiction.
Yeah. That's probably a better term to use for that. So. Are there some things I can tell you about the canal? I'm responding to questions. I guess that's the.
Oh yeah, sorry, got you off your.
Yeah. Keep on going.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there are 4 places that you can see a canal boat in Ohio. This is the only one operated by the Ohio Historical Society. But there's a boat up at Providence Park, which is up near Maumee, near Grand Rapids, Ohio, and. There are 2 boats over on the Ohio and Erie side. The Ohio and Erie Canal ran from Cleveland to Portsmouth, and there's a boat at Canal Fulton near Akron, and there's a boat at Coshocton in central
Roscoe Village.
They don't own the boat. I understand the city of Coshocton owns the boat, but they are close by, and they do cooperate, I think, with that. So we operate here from basically June, July, and August for the public. And in a normal year, now this is not a normal year,
not by any stretch.
But in a normal year, we have 4th graders coming to Ohio, coming to our site for their Ohio history. And so we do April and May 5th graders, June, July, and August adults, and then September and October 4th graders again. I'm going to have to go up top and do a little bit of work.
Sure.
Problem.
And we're going to come back to the dock here momentarily.
All right, thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Good job, that's great.
that's going to wrap up our tour of the Johnston, keep wanting to call it family farm, Johnston Farm and Indian Agency outside of Piqua, Ohio. What'd you think, Rich?
I enjoyed it. I learned a lot.
Yeah, boat ride, ancient house here, which there's under restoration there, so we might check that out another time. But the museum with our AAA was $8 a piece. Highly recommended. Do it.
Yep.
And who knows where the toll road will lead to next.
See ya.